Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Kelly Sparks. On location today with my good friend Sherman. He was kind enough to invite me over to his house and share some of his nice whiskey, and just wanted to introduce him first.
How y'all doing?
I guess Sherman's going to tell us a little story. What first got you into it? You're pretty new to the whiskey scene, bourbon scene, tasting, collecting. You've got a pretty nice start. I do say it's a lot nicer than what mine was whenever I first got into it. But what kind of got you on this path?
It really, truth be told, it all started. I was at the golf course playing golf, and we had just got through with our round. And I went inside, and me and my girlfriend, we got a few drinks, and I've always saw old fashions on the menu, and I said, man, you know what? I'm gonna get me an old fashioned. I've had one in the past, and I've always thought they were too strong. I was like, a little much on the bourbon side or whatever was in it. I didn't even know what was in it.
It's usually either bourbons or rye.
Yeah. Well, now I know that, but yeah. So sat down, and they made us the old fashioned. Made me the old fashioned. She doesn't drink anything that strong, and I tasted it, and I was like, man, that's pretty tasty, and kind of a little bit started wondering a little bit, what all went into an old fashioned and how they were made, and pretty much that's what spurred it off.
Just having a really good drink.
A really good drink.
Like, man, that's really good. What is in this?
Yeah, exactly.
Before we keep going on that, I just want, all right, so Jim Beam Products, which is Knob Creek, is a Jim Beam product. Oh yeah, we are going to review. I've never had this one before, and this man is kind enough to share it with me. This is the Knob Creek 2001 limited edition. So, not really sure. I guess it was distilled in 2001. I think it's a 15-year-old. Is that what you said?
I thought it was. Don't get me the line.
It's like 14 or 15 years old. Whatever. You guys know that I don't bring a lot of information. Just kind of wing it. But I want you to just notice, this is what happens to the wax on Jim Beam products. Whenever the bottle sits for a little while, the wax gets really brittle and it crumbles. So be careful when you're taking that off, because your first drink might have a little bit of wax in it. And let's see. Okay, good. So they're smart, and I like this personally. The synthetic corks. Okay. Just because it'll keep the whiskey like it is a lot longer. If you have something you really, really like and you just want to sit on it for a while, take a sip here and there, break it out on New Year's Eve, break it out on your birthday or whatever, and it has a natural cork, then I would suggest you every 3 to 6 months moisten that cork a little bit, because it will dry out.
I read that online. I was my buddy at work was telling me, he said, a good way to keep those corks fresh and not, and because he said that's what he does, is he takes old corks and he collects them, because he said you never know when one's going to rot out and then you need to replace it with one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And he said those natural corks will rot out if you don't turn the bottle upside down and let them soak in the juice for a little bit. So.
And another thing, since this is the first sip, one thing that I always try to tell people we discussed on the channel before is the first sip out of the bottle might not taste the same as the sips coming from the middle. Okay. Because as soon as you open it, for whatever reason, and it could just be in our heads, that first sip is a little bit weaker. It's like all the oils are kind of sitting at the bottom. What I normally do, and I forgot to do it on this one, is I'll take and I'll just shake it up, give it a good shake, mix everything back up again, and then I'll pour. Okay. But you might notice you'll have video evidence here, so you can pick apart whatever, you can taste here and there. If you might like it, you might not like it, whatever. And then once you get about halfway through it, or the next time you sip it, you're like, oh, that tastes a little different. You can actually go back and watch the video now and compare your notes. Okay. So, but there's so many different ways to taste whiskey. There's really no wrong way other than just taking shots. to drinking for effect. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? One of my favorite ways, and this one is a little bit more. What's the word I'm looking for? It's more invasive. You got to hold it on your palate a little bit longer. So something that's 100 plus proof might have a little more heat to it.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to affect you a little more as far as your flavors and your taste buds. But one that I like that I learned in Las Vegas at the Whiskey Attic, which if you ever go to Las Vegas, I would recommend going to the Whiskey Attic because that's a whole tasting class. And it's a room, you can look up pictures online. They've got like $7 million worth of whiskey. And they've got like anything and everything. They go all over the world searching out stuff to bring it back to that one little room, one little building for just literally tasting classes.
Okay.
But the one that I like that they do is you take a sip, about the same size as like your first sip of hot coffee. You just poured a fresh cup, that first little sip, just kind of get your tongue used to the heat. Take something a little bit bigger than that, and you're gonna hold it on your palate for about 5 to 10 seconds. In that time, your mouth's gonna start to salivate. So you're gonna take that saliva and mix it with the whiskey. So you're basically cutting the whiskey with your own saliva. So once you do that, 10 to 15 seconds, take just a tiny little swallow because the volume of fluid that's gonna be in your mouth after you take that sip, it's gonna triple, sometimes quadruple because of all the saliva. So if you're at 100 proof on this whiskey, after 10 to 15 seconds, it's going to cut it down to about 80. And then take a small sip, or just take a small swallow just a little bit of it, not the whole thing. Then more saliva is going to build up, so it's going to cut it down to like 60 and then 40, and these are just rough numbers. So it breaks it down to each level so you can kind of figure out, okay, well, that first sip was a little strong. The flavors were a little too powerful. Well, the second one, I liked it a little bit better. So that kind of gives you a range where you can figure out, hey, in this whiskey, I kind of like it better at this proof. So, and you really get to experience every single flavor that the whiskey has. That's probably one of my favorite methods. Beyond that, they're all pretty simple. Some of them you nose first. The Las Vegas method, you don't even nose it at all. They recommend you not to nose it because the alcohol, especially if it's strong enough, it's gonna, because most of our taste buds come from our smell, right? So when you nose it, that alcohol is gonna singe and affect your taste buds automatically.
Yeah.
So you wanna go ahead and try it?
Yeah, that's.
You wanna try it that way, or you just try it however you want?
I
And
wanna
then
do
just
it-
experiment, or
I like doing it the old-fashioned way,
Nice.
nosing it. That's kind of what I've been practicing on. And
I don't mind, as long as you don't like get all the way into it,
Yeah.
and then like inhale deeply where it's kind of burns the nostrils. I think that's just fine.
I tell you, I struggle with picking up the fruit notes in a lot of these bourbons. The
Yeah.
oak, the alcohol content in it, and the pretty much the vanilla and cinnamon and all of
Yeah.
that in it. That's what I catch first. And then when people tell me they and maybe a hint of banana every now and then, but
Man.
everything else is tough. I'm struggling
It's-
with the fruit.
So it's all so subjective and completely dependent on you and you alone. I'm going to taste something different than you're going to taste. The guys on the podcast, we taste whiskeys all the time together, and we'll have 3 different flavor profiles from the same whiskey out of the same bottle. So it's not that big of a deal. One thing I do recommend is, and this is for beginners and like people who are trying to figure out and try to get their way in this whiskey world, actually look up the tasting notes.
Okay.
Some people, they're like, oh, don't look up, just taste it first and see what you can do and then look it up. I mean, that's cool, but eventually I would recommend you find the tasting notes, like the elaborate tasting notes for whatever whiskey you're tasting, and see if they kind of come back, see if those flavors come back.
Yeah.
You wanna go ahead? What do you think? I think it smells delicious.
It does. Once again, like a nutmeg, vanilla, maybe just the fruit. I'm just maybe a banana with maybe a hint of citrus orange,
It's-
kind of. is what I'm picking up.
No, you hit it right on the nose. I
Yeah.
don't think you have a problem picking out fruits.
And
Because like as soon as you said banana, and I was tasting it, I was trying to figure it out, but yeah, it was those exactly.
not too oaky.
No, not at all. This one's actually
It's not spicy on the nose at all to me.
it's not spicy on the
It's not.
on the palate either.
I'm going in.
And it's got a little more oak, a little more woodiness on the palate, but the fruitiness kind of comes through. It's like fruity and nutty with oak at the beginning, in my opinion.
Okay.
And one thing, so we're in a non-climate, well, no, we're not climate controlled. We're
I
in
got a heater
got a
right
heater
there.
over there. So,
But,
so something else that will affect the flavor of this is the temperature of the liquid in the
Okay.
glass. So what I recommend to people, if you're right now we're in his shop and it's what 45 degrees outside, probably 45 degrees in here.
45, 50, yeah.
So like I can feel the whiskey in this glass and it's slightly chilled. So the flavors you're getting right now versus if you were to take and put it in a little vial and then put it in your pocket and walk around with it for a few hours and let it heat up, they're
Okay.
going to be completely different.
Yeah.
The flavors are going to be a lot more present. So what I would recommend, if you're really wanting to pick out the notes, warm the whiskey up a little bit.
Okay.
It's like,
Kind of let it break down like when you.
well, you're in chemical. You deal with chemicals, right?
Exactly.
Okay. I don't want to throw your business out there, but you know how when you heat up a liquid, the molecules move around a lot. When you cool it down, they get real tight and they don't move.
Exactly.
So same thing with whiskey. When it's warmer, they're more active. They'll move around a lot. They'll tell you a lot more. So that's one way to look at it further on down the road. Now, if you're just drinking, just having a good time, whatever, man, drink it however you want it.
Yeah.
I actually like this one.
It's pretty good and it's smooth. It didn't the bite when it went down didn't get too much of a hug, believe it or not. And
Not really.
that's kind of rare with Knob Creek, isn't it? Aren't they pretty good at the
Well, Knob Creek is in the same family as Booker's.
Okay.
And Booker's always has a strong hug going down. That was it Kentucky hug or something like that? That warm
Yeah.
feeling going down your throat into your chest.
Yeah.
Knob Creek usually does. I know the single barrel does. And something that possibly could affect that is the chilling of the liquid as well.
Okay.
So I know for a fact I've had, for instance, this bottle right here.
Which I heard that's some good juice right there. Oh my gosh.
I heard through a
Don't laugh. I hadn't opened a lot of them up there. I'm a beginner. I just like to have it readily available so that when I decide that I'm ready to bust it open, it's there and I'm ready.
There's nothing wrong with that, Sherman. So this one I actually heard from a pretty reputable source. Is a wild turkey product.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. Now they might do stuff to it elsewhere, wherever it's bottled. But you can see on the back it says distilled in Kentucky, bottled by Conecuh Ridge Distillery, Auburndale, Florida.
Okay.
So I heard this was a wild turkey product because it's a Kentucky straight bourbon. But the story I had with this one, I just got into the bourbon scene. I was pretty much where you're at, but I hadn't got to the collecting part. I was still buying a bottle, drinking that bottle, going to get another one or a different one. I was in that phase. I didn't have the financial stability to just go out and collect just at that moment. But I went over to a friend's house, and I had probably about maybe about that much, about 2/3
Yeah.
ish, 3/4, 2/3 left in the bottle, and it was a chilly winter night, like late December, whatever. It was kind of cool out like it is. They had a fire going, and I had a bottle, and I just sat out there, just sitting there looking at the fire, and I commenced to finishing that whole bottle, and no problem, like nothing else, just that, just sitting there, just sip, doop, 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 sip. Next thing I know, I'm drunk off my ass.
Very easy to do.
Oh, very. And that have you had the Clyde Mage yet?
No. Hadn't opened it. I bought it at the liquor store, and I just saw it, and I said, man, eventually I'm going to want to break off into it. And
Well,
hadn't done it yet. As you can see, most of those up there have not been broken off.
I'd say a good 75-80% of it.
I'd supposed to say 85%.
Yeah, probably 88. Yeah, I was being nice. Well, once you get into this one a little deep, let me know.
Okay.
Because I've got one bottle of the 10-year cask strength, and it is delicious.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it's a 10-year cask strength wild turkey because
Okay.
it tastes almost identical to rare breed, but it's 10 years old.
Okay.
So, well, man, thank you for this drink. We're going to be
problem.
back again. We're going to probably do one or two more, depending on how generous Sherman
I'm
is.
very generous. We can go through it as long as we're not getting too crazy with it, and people can get home safely.
Oh yeah,
That's the main thing.
we'll just take a little break. So
Yeah.
stay tuned for the next one. Like always, check the description below for all the links to help out around the house with the chores and whatnot. Teespring, Tattered Beans, Patron. Hey, mind you, this man not only is my friend sharing his whiskey with me, he is also a patron. So he's supporting on multiple levels. Well, thank you, appreciate it. That's why what the camera is sitting on right now is some whiskey that I brought over.
Ooh,
So
I can't wait.
never come empty-handed. That didn't sound right. Anyway, like always, drink some whiskey, share with your friends and family, and have a nice day. Y'all take care.
Later.